tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to use the brushes to blend inside of the Pixlr program. Pixlr is a lot like Photoshop, but very limited tools, but it is set up the most like Photoshop from any other program that I've come across. So you can type in Pixlr editor, select pixlr.com, and they have Pixlr X and Pixlr E. Pixlr X doesn't have as many functions as Pixlr E, so let's go ahead and go to Pixlr E. And then you can either open an image or you can click on Create New. So you'd click on Open an Image if you have a drawing that you wanted to import. I'm going to click on Create New. And then if you notice over here, it tells you the max pixels this program will support. This worked well. So on a desktop computer that I have, it worked well. It didn't have any lag. But then I tried going through the max pixels for the highest quality rendering that I could on a Chromebook, and it had such a big lag that when I was trying to blend with the paintbrush, I couldn't tell where my brush was or where I was blending because it trailed behind so badly. You're going to scroll down and you're going to go ahead and pick something that's kind of large, but not quite as large as that. If you have too much lag, then start this tutorial over again and choose something that's smaller than this. So 3,840 by 2,000 something, that gets transferred up here. I want you to title it with your name, your first and last, and then call it Blending Practice. I do want to have a background on this one. Sometimes I want a transparent background, but for this it's going to be much easier if we have a white background. So choose white and then click Create. There's a couple of tools that you need to know whenever you're doing something in a drawing program. You need to know where your layers are located, and you can add layers by clicking the plus sign, or you can sort through your layers by clicking on these two arrows for up or down. Once you have more layers, there's going to be a slide bar that you can use to go through your layers. You also need to know how to undo. So Control-Z is the universal undo button for any program, or you can go to Edit, Undo. If you want to zoom in, you can slide this back and forth to zoom in and out, or you can hit Control plus to zoom in or Control minus to zoom out. Okay, we're going to begin by starting with layering or labeling our layers that we're going to be working with. So click on this first layer and then click on the three dots, and let's title this one Outline. So that's going to be our outline layer, and then click out of that. Then you're going to add another layer. So click on the plus sign, click on the empty, and let's relabel this. So I click on the three dots and we're going to layer this blending layer. Click out of that. And then I'm going to click on the plus sign and add one more layer. And this third layer is going to be our shadow layer. So click out of that. I want to rearrange these. So if you can't see them all at one time because your screen might be small, you can scroll up and down and see all of them. I want the outline layer to be at the top. Then I want the blending layer. And then the bottom layer, I want to be my shadow layer. You might think about locking this layer, but I had trouble in this program locking it. You don't want to draw on this layer at all. This is just for the purpose of selecting. I locked it in Pixlr and it kind of gave me a hard time. So you can lock it or try that if you want, but I'm not going to. So I have it clicked, and then I'm going to start by putting my drawing on there. We're going to do a drawing instead of importing a drawing, right? So I noticed if I click here, it unselects that layer. So make sure between selecting this and clicking on what you want to add, you don't accidentally click in the middle as you go over. So I've clicked on the Shapes tool and I want a circle. And I don't want to have a fill in here. So I'm going to take the fill and I'm going to get rid of that. My stroke is at 5. My opacity is at 100. Now, if you click and you drag the circle shape, that's not a circle. And so instead of hitting backspace or delete, that will get rid of the layer over here. You're going to hit Control Z, or you're going to go up there and hit Edit Undo. So this time I'm going to take my sphere and I'm going to hit Shift and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag, tell us the size that I want it, and then I let go of everything and it will be a perfect circle. Then I'm going to take the selection tool or the magic wand and click inside of the circle. This is preventing me from coloring outside of the lines. So again, you only select on this top layer, but then we're going to go to the layer underneath that, and that's where we're going to do all of the work. So while it's selected, I'm going to come over here, move this, and I am going to decide what color I want my sphere to be. So I'm going to click on the blue, and I think I want it to be red. You can choose anything you want to choose, but you want to choose a middle value. So I think of values as 5 being black, 0 being white, and then middle values being like a value 3. So this is a middle value for me. So I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to paint bucket. So I clicked on the paint bucket. I have my color selected, and then I'm going to click inside of the sphere. So that's going to just give me a middle value, and I just have to worry about adding my darks and my lights. It really does save quite a bit of time. So when we add the lights and darks, we're going to use the brush tool, and then we have to set it up. So when you're blending with a brush, the two things that you have to really worry about is that it's a fuzzy brush and that it's transparent. So the more transparent, the more control you have over the brush. So click on the brush tool. We are going to increase the size something around here, about around 800. We're going to increase the softness because we want it to be a fuzzy brush. And then this program has something weird called steps. And so if I take this up, you have those little dots. And if I was to draw, it would actually look like a line of dots. And so with a brush this size, I found that step 5 works pretty good. And then I'm going to click out of it, click up here to click out. We are going to then change opacity. So opacity, when I take it down, makes it more transparent. And so I'm going to take it all the way down to like the teens or the 20s. And then I'm going to make some passes. I want this side of my sphere to be the, we got to choose a darker value. I'm like, why isn't it working? Okay. So you're going to choose a darker value, and we're going to add our shadows first. And I'm not going to click completely on black, just a darker color for now. My main shadow side is going to be over here. So as I click and I drag, if I don't unclick, no matter how many times I go over this area, it's going to just add that 19% opacity that I have selected. And so I'm going to go all the way around the edge of the circle because I want a little bit of darker value to creep in on this lighter side that's going to be on the right-hand side. The moment I unclick and re-click, it's going to put another layer of the color that I selected. Another 19% of that layer is going to be added on there. And so if you can see how every time I add another layer, it gets a little darker. And so that's what you're going to do. You're going to just kind of blend by adding another layer of this transparent color with my fuzzy brush. If you want it to go faster, you can up the opacity, but then you kind of lose a little bit of that control. I'm going to go around again because I want it to be very three-dimensional. I don't like this jump, and so I'm going to add a little bit of value here. And this is where you kind of have to manipulate it, play with it, and try to fix any bumps or that you might have in the edges of these values. I am going to go touch it back up by adding light value in again. I still have a little tiny bit of this value right here, so I'm going to just kind of touch on it. You can make your opacity more transparent. And so now I have something like this. I'm going to go even darker on this side of the sphere. Maybe wrap it around one more time. Notice how I'm barely on the edge of this. It's still adding a little bit of value because there's overspray. So the color is outside of this actual circle that you see. This cursor, it sprays past that line. Still a little bit jumpy, but now I'm gonna just kind of go back to a lighter value and kind of touch that up. And so I don't like this jump here. So I'm just gonna kind of wiggle around. And you see how I have a little bit of lag? Now it's the battle between how much lag do you want to have on your Chromebook and how much quality do you want to have. So the higher the quality, the more lag you're going to have. And so you got to figure out how high of a quality you can have without getting too frustrated with this. And I'm just going back and I'm trying to round this out a little bit. That little jump that's right there, I want to get rid of that. And then I found when you're working on the light side, if you take your brush and you make it as big as you possibly can, so click out of that, and then I go lighter. So I'm going to work my way up here. It kind of gives you a nicer blend. I wouldn't use the biggest brush on the other side because then it will give you too much overspray, but if we're just kind of clicking around this middle, so I'm going to click and wiggle, oops, wiggle right here, and then I'm going to end up going lighter, a little bit of lag. It's a little frozen right now. Okay, I'm going to go even lighter. And to have a good looking sphere, you need to have a good amount of contrast. So that means you have some areas that are super light and some areas that are super dark. So every time I click on that, it's getting a little lighter, dealing with that lag. And then I might say, okay, maybe that looks good, or maybe I want to go back and I want to touch some things up. But let's say that you lost your color. You have no idea what color this was. You can click on the sampler tool and you can go back and say, okay, maybe I want to clean up on this edge a little bit. So I'm going to find that color that I had, and then I'm going to go back to my brush. I don't want it to be the largest brush. And then I'm gonna try to work on a little bit of the shape a little bit more. So I'm gonna take this down a little smaller. If it's too small, it's hard to blend. If it's too big, you have too much overspray. So I'm going to bring this down to like 7, something under 10, and I wanna work on this edge just a little bit more because I didn't like the way that that jumped. So I'm spanning the edge of that darkness and that lightness, trying to just get it to look exactly the way I want it. So you're going to play back and forth, trying to get it to look rounded. Again, you're going to have a little bit of value creep all the way around the edge, have more shadow on this side, and then have your light source on that side. Now, every object that you do is, or look at when you draw, is going to have some sort of reflected light. And so let's go ahead and choose a color for that reflected light. I'm going to have the light that's bouncing off of it be like a blue light. You can have whatever color you want. And I don't want a large brush for this because I don't want a lot of overspray. And I'm going to kind of start by going outside of this edge a little bit and seeing how much overspray I'm getting on there. And I just want a little bit of that reflected light in there. That's a little bit too dark, so I'm going to go a little bit lighter. So reflected light is light that's bouncing off of some other part of the room, and then it's hitting the object again. So the light's coming in from the right-hand side, hitting the table, and then right now I have it at 7% opacity. You can make it higher if you want, and then a little bit of light is hitting right here. It's kind of nice to change the color to something else to make it more dynamic, but if you wanted this to be inside of your original color scheme, you know, you could do that. Okay. If that, again, got too much, you can go back to your sampler, you can choose your old color, and then you can go back in. Actually, let me choose, yeah, we'll just see what happens. And I'm gonna just kind of blend that in just a little bit better. If you feel like you need the shadow edge, that's this darkest part, to be a little bit darker, you can go ahead and do that at this point. But you really want to, in this step, make sure that everything looks exactly the way that you want it, because once we unselect it, we don't really want to have to go back and deal with it, okay? A little bit brighter right here. And then I want it to probably be, we'll just call that good. So once this looks non-choppy, it has the light source, that's light, the shadow edge, and then the reflected light, we can move on to the second part. And so that's going to be the shadow. So when I click over here on the shadow, make sure that that's highlighted. I actually want to work outside of the sphere. So a quick trick would be to go select, and then you're going to go to invert selection. So we are selecting everything but the circle now. And then whatever I draw, I cannot draw here anymore while I'm on the shadow layer. For the shadow, I'm going to choose to use black. And then let's see how big my brush is. I'm going to start off with a little bit of a bigger brush. And then I'm going to show you how you can use the eraser tool to fix up any overspray or get rid of something. So see how large that is? I don't want to be here forever. So let me start off with like something in the 20s. And then you got to figure out how you want your shadow to look. Having a little bit of lag again. And you see that, how it just shot across after the fact. Okay. So as long as I press and hold, it's going to be all that same value that's being added. But then I let go and I press again, it's going to be a darker layer. So I'm just putting a little bit on, and then I want it to be darker. Oops, Control Z, that lag kind of shot that across. I want it to be darker as it gets closer to the sphere. And then I'm going to probably change my brush so it's smaller. But I want to get enough layers on there. I want it to get pretty dark right down here. Kind of the darker I go, right where it touches on the table, that's, oops, too far, Control Z. And that's going to make your shape pop out the most. So super, super dark right there. I don't really love the shape of my shadow, so I'm going to play with the eraser tool. So the eraser tool is going to work the same exact kind of way as a brush, except for it's going to take stuff off instead of put stuff on. So I'm going to increase the size of that. I don't want it to be too soft, but just kind of soft, making those steps down low again. So you have to redo your settings. And then you could start off with 100% opacity if you're you don't want that much control. So I want to make this shadow just a little bit thinner. And so I'm kind of going around here. The shadow is going to be sharper up towards the front of the shape, so it's going to have less of a blurry edge. And then it's going to be more blurry as you get farther and farther away from the shape. So I'm going to make sure I come out here pretty far to get rid of all that overspray. And then I'm going to tilt my shadow back up a little bit more. I don't like how bumpy it is right here. So I'm going to kind of, oops, Control Z. Trying to just even this, Control Z, out a little bit. So there it is. Like, notice I'm not even like near it, and that overspray is kind of just taking some of that shadow edge up. Now I want it to be a little bit more fuzzy as I get farther away to the back of the shadow. So let's take that softness, let's take that up a little bit. I want this to be blurry, kind of how it is. And I want it to be, oops, Control Z. I want to have more control. So let's take that opacity down to something really, really low. So I want it to be a little bit more fuzzy right here. I want to kind of bring the darkness of that shadow in a little bit so that the darkness is more towards the base of the thing. Lighten up this just a little tiny bit more. Then you can go back and forth forever on this. So it's kind of like a double shadow where it's extra dark right near the sphere and then it's lighter as it gets farther out. I'm going to take my brush size. I'm going to bring it up bigger and then click out here. Got the lag again. And then maybe even have, so I'm at 7%, so that's good. Have it be really fuzzy right here. So I'm kind of erasing just a little bit of that off. Okay, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I probably would go through and I would make this not look so lumpy right here. I would add a little bit more, just kind of finesse it a little bit. Got the lag again. Maybe just kind of click a few times right there to get rid of those bumps. So you are not quite done. So let me let my computer catch up to me. Give it a second. So right now we have a very small outline going around the sphere. And so it depends on how you want your drawings to look. So some animated characters might look good with an outline. But in this case, so if I zoom in, I don't really want that outline in this piece. And so it's easy, oops, hold on, Control Z. Do you see how it did that after the lag? So Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, until it gets rid of that little halo that was there. Actually, I kind of want to fix this up a little bit more. It's bothering me, and then I'll go over the very last step. Let's see. Just a little. Okay, well, you get the idea. So I want to get rid of that outline. So I'm going to zoom in so you can see what it looks like. And then that is on this layer. And so I am going to click on that layer. Oh, and then I'm going to select Deselect. And before I do this, like let's say that you needed to touch up on something again. While this layer is clicked, you can go ahead and just, again, find your magic wand, click on that, and then you can work on your blending layer again if you need to. Or you can select the inverse, and then you can work on your shadow layer again. But we don't need to do that at this point. I feel like I'm done enough. And so I'm going to go select, deselect, and then on this outline layer, I'm just going to hit delete. And then that gets rid of the line. So if you notice when I kind of zoom in a little bit more, there's a little bit of this halo of pixels that didn't really get colored. If you're using Autodesk Sketchbook or Photoshop, you probably wouldn't have those little spots that are in there. Or if you're able to work with the pixels being at least a 4,000 or higher. And so the higher the pixels, the better. And then again, Photoshop, you wouldn't really have this much of a problem with that little bit of the halo of light that's kind of going around the sphere. All right, so let me go ahead and zoom out. So Control minus, and then I want to save this. So I'm going to save it. And then it's saying, do I want it to be a JPEG, a PNG? So this one I would just say, okay, let's just make it a JPEG because it has a white background. But if you didn't have a white background and you wanted it to be transparent, then you would save it as a PNG. And of course, you want to have it the highest quality possible. So you're going to make it go as high as it can. So you might be thinking, well, I'm going to change the pixels at the end. That's not going to help you. You got to start with good pixels to begin with because it's just going to look the same right now if I increase the size of these pixels. So whatever you started with, that's what you're kind of stuck with. All right. And then you can go ahead and download it and then you can turn it into me. So I'm going to go ahead and hit download. and then turn it. And then it says it saved the image, you hit close, and then you are all done with the 3D sphere.